In one of my previous videos, I have mentioned how I don't really set language goals for myself anymore, and that what I do instead is I create a language learning bucket list that has a lot of different language projects. So I guess in this video, I just wanted to talk a little more in detail about why I personally prefer having a language bucket list and language projects rather than setting language goals for myself. But first of all, do I think that setting language goals is bad? The short answer is no. I myself used to have language goals all the time. For example, back when I was a Korean government scholarship program student, my goal was to pass level 5 of the test of proficiency in Korean, because that would mean getting paid $100 more on top of my scholarship until the end of the scholarship program. So yeah, at that time, passing topic 5, for example, was a goal for me. Another thing is that I don't necessarily think that goals and projects are mutually exclusive. I think you can have goals and at the same time have those little language projects that help you achieve those goals. I would say that the way I see it is that goals are something that can give you a sense of direction or an idea of where you are going or where you want to be eventually with your language learning, while language projects are kind of like actionable steps that you can take to get to that destination. It's just that personally, now where I am in my life, language learning is a hobby for me. It is a hobby that I love. It is something that I do every single day, but it is just a hobby. My life does not depend on it. I'm not planning to get a job that would require a new language. I am not moving to another country. So that means I can be much more chill with my learning compared to how I was, let's say, 5 years ago. And that's what I choose to do. So instead of one goal or a list of goals, what I choose to have is a bucket list of language projects. I will give you more examples later, but some of those projects can be things like listening to my first audiobook in Spanish, or completing a graded reader in Italian, or practicing shadowing in Japanese for 2 weeks. And the reason why I call it a bucket list is because there's no particular or strict order to it, and also because there's no pressure to complete all of those projects. By the way, I first heard about language projects, I think in one of Robin's videos, so I'm definitely not the one who came up with this idea, but I watched his video so long ago, I think it was a couple of years ago at this point, that I definitely think I have since put my own spin on it. So if you want to hear what he has to say and what language projects are for him, go check his video. I will leave a link to it in the description box. I think the number one reason is that having language projects allows me to be as flexible as I need. I get bored of things very often, and I always want to have an idea of what it is that I could do next. I know that I've said before that I don't really have language goals, but it's not completely true. I would say my two main goals are to be consistent with my language learning and to have fun doing it. So I do not want anything, be it boredom or not being sure what to do next, to interrupt this flow that I have. Which is why as soon as I feel like something is not working, I always want to have a backup plan ready and waiting for me. The second reason is that it allows me not to get stuck on the same thing. I used to have this problem, I want to say back in college, where when I just started college, I decided that I wanted to read a lot of things that have to do with the certain area of my major. Those were not really books that we had to read, those were just books that I personally wanted to read to know more about the stuff that interested me. But the problem was that those books were quite difficult to read, so they were not really something that you read for fun. And I already had like 5 to 8 to 10 hours of studying every day. So after being done with my classes and my homework for the day, the last thing I wanted to do was picking up another book that had to do with my studies. But I told myself that I wanted to read more books that had to do with my major, so I would not let myself read anything else for fun. As a result, even though I am someone who loves reading, I spent those 4 years of university reading very little, and not because I was super busy at school. It was more because I had this rigid idea of what I wanted to read, and I wouldn't let myself read anything else. And this is exactly what I want to avoid with my language learning. I do not want to feel like I only have to stick to one book or one resource or one goal that I have made for myself. So what I do instead is that I come up with as many projects as I can, and then I let myself switch between them when I feel like I'm stuck on one of them. I also feel like my language bucket list gives me less pressure than a list of goals would, because I have so many projects on that list that I kind of understand at this point that it's not really realistic for me to complete all of them. But even though I don't have to complete all of them, I also know that the more things I cross off, the better my language skills are going to be. And as a recovering perfectionist, I find this really helpful because it allows me to switch my focus from perfection to improving. And then the last reason is that I think goals are very black and white. You either achieve them or you fail. My bucket list, on the other hand, I feel like the way I set it up really highlights achievements rather than making me focus on what I was not able to do. How do I come up with my language projects? So the first thing I do is I look at the materials I have, and those can be both textbooks or just books that I already have at home. It can be something that my local library has to offer. It can also be online resources, either the ones that I already use or maybe ones that I saved somewhere on my computer and never touched since. Another source of inspiration for me is just skills I want to work on. For example, reading for me is probably the skill that I always focus on the most. And so for pretty much any of my languages, you will see projects like 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 words on close master, because vocabulary is really important for reading. Then you will see things like finish a graded reader, finish a children's book, read an actual novel, listen to an audiobook, and things like that. If you're someone who wants to improve your writing, for example, your language projects can look like write an essay and upload it to a website like Journally or High Native so that native speakers can give you feedback on your writing. Or it can be to keep a journal in your target language for 2 weeks or maybe a month. I think you get the idea. Another one is just things that are either interesting or challenging to you. Maybe you want to master a topic that is considered to be really hard, like subjuntivo in Spanish. And then there are also things that are important to you personally. Let's say you are someone who loves golf, and most people, when they study a new language, are probably not going to want to learn how to say golf club in their first few months of language learning. But for you, it might be important because chances are you're going to be talking about it or watching videos or reading in your target language about it. So that kind of vocabulary is important, and you can also put that on your bucket list. For classes, I usually go with a certain number. For example, take 5 classes or take 10 classes. And then another source of ideas for your projects could be just media that you like to consume. Let's say you're someone who really likes books and you watch a lot of booktube. So an idea of a project could be to find a booktuber who speaks your target language and to watch 5 of their videos. Once I have a list of projects, I try to break them down into even smaller projects. So my goal here is to make them small, but at the same time big enough for them to make a difference in my language learning. For example, reading one book in a language. For Spanish, I would not put that on my list of projects because at this point I've read over 20 books in Spanish and I don't really feel like reading one book will make a lot of difference. So when it comes to Spanish, I will put something like read 5 books or read 10 books. But for my Italian, where I haven't read a book yet, something like reading one book is a project on its own. And same goes for other types of projects. For example, writing one journal entry in a language that you know really well will probably not make a difference. But if it's a language that you've been studying for a couple of months only, that one journal entry can tell you a lot about your writing skills if that's the first time you're sitting down to try to write in your language. So try to make them as small or big as it seems appropriate to you. But I would say that my ultimate goal for this bucket list of mine is to give me something to celebrate when it comes to language learning. So I often break things down into even smaller projects just because I want to have another opportunity to tell myself that even though I did not finish the whole textbook, finishing this project that said complete 10 chapters from this textbook is already worth celebrating. So this is what my bucket list looks like, and you will see that I have all of my projects divided by languages. So I have Spanish, I have Greek, I also have Italian, which I have a lot for. I do not have anything for Japanese for this year. I also have some projects for Korean, some for Polish, and I had this one project for English, which was to start a channel in English, which I've already completed. Let's take a closer look into what my projects look like and what I track for each of the projects. So here we have Italian, for example. Let's take this one, which was to translate a song in Italian. You can see that every project has a status. This one is done, but other options would be not started, in progress, or importantly, abandoned, because I tend to do this. I abandon things sometimes, and that's fine. This first column, I call it activity plan. And the third one is activity fact, because I don't always know what exactly it is that I'm going to be doing when I come up with an idea for a language project. So this language project was to translate a song, and here I wrote down the titles of the songs that I actually translated. So when it comes to tags, let's say for this project it's vocabulary, grammar, and immersion. For something like, let's say, Read Heartstopper Volume 4, it would be reading and immersion. What I also track is how much time it took me to complete a project. For example, let's go back to the one about translating songs. I started it on the 17th of January and I finished it in 3 days. Whereas this one, for example, completing 3,000 most common words on Closemaster, was started in August, and then I finished it in January because I took a big break where I was not studying any Italian. Another thing is that I also have a library for all of the textbooks that I have, and so this one is in Russian, but this is a linked database that is called Resources and Materials, and this is where I can link any textbook that I have if a project has to do with said textbook. Here, for example, one of my goals is to finish this textbook that I have for Polish, which is called Polski Krok po Kroku, and I can press on this and I can go and I can see all of the projects that I have related to this textbook, which were to complete 10 units and to finish the textbook. Another important thing is that I have this view that is called 2023 achievements. And this is basically the view where all of my projects go as soon as I mark them as done. So for example, Read a Children's Book in Italian was a project that I marked as done. And if we go to the achievements tab, you will see that Read a Children's Book is among those projects. And this is what I meant when I was talking about how this whole system allows me to celebrate my achievements rather than focus on something that I did not do. Same goes for 2022. These, for example, are all of the projects that I've completed across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different languages. So this is pretty much it. I hope you found this video useful, and if you want to download the template and copy it to your Notion, the link will be down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!